get the people in early. Like if you're thinking about selling, that's a good time to have a conversation, because it's not going to cost you anything for me to come in and give you some advice or where you might be able to increase some value.
Welcome to Smart Selling Steps with Cardinia Property, where you'll get the insider insights on the best way to get your property sold in the current real estate market.
Hello and welcome to the Cardinia Property Smart Selling Steps podcast. Today we are lucky enough to have Mark Wood from Lawnworks Property Services, along with Rod Dreesen from Wow Clean Carpets and Windows. Welcome, gentlemen. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for inviting us.
Thank you.
Is it your very first podcast, Rod? Are
Definitely.
you feeling a little bit nervous?
I am feeling nervous.
Yeah,
feeling
and
tense.
I think that Mark is channeling excitement / nervous all at once.
I am quite, but they're exactly the same emotions you feel for excitement and nervous. So I'm just going with excitement.
Yeah, so a little bit different to being on the tools today, but it's, it is a hot day outside, so it's good to maybe do something different.
Air conditioning. Oh,
30-degree days. You'd be wanting this to take all day, I reckon, you fellas. One of what we're going to cover with you guys, because you're both in the, Rod, you're in the carpet and window cleaning game predominantly, and Mark, you're in gardens and lawns, sort of external, and house cleaning. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Yeah, so we're talking about presentation of a property relating to real estate for people who are getting their house up to speed with a view to selling. And presentation is one of the key pieces of the puzzle when it comes to marketing a property. So there's a few areas that you guys specialise in that will help a number of our listeners, but I'll start with, because sometimes people either, if there's been an investment property that hasn't been looked after, or if a house has sat there vacant for a long time or there's an estate where it hasn't been maintained, if you get called to a property that's a total mess with the garden overgrown, lawns 3 feet high, and just a horrible condition, because not everything, I imagine, can be fixed in 1 hour-long visit or half-day visit. What are some of the things that need attention first and foremost when you start getting to a total mess?
Well, you just have to judge. It's hard to judge on the first visit because you're walking in, as you said, they might be 3 foot high. It's a jungle. So you just need to explain to them that you can give them a rough guide of what you think's the work that's going to entail, but at the end of the day, there's going to be things that you can't see behind that growth. So there may be additional costs or works involved that to get it up to scratch on what they want to see or the vision they want for when they're going to sell.
Yeah, so sometimes the weed can cover up rubbish and things that need taking away, or garden beds that you didn't even know were there, and that it's hard. It's a full landscaping job.
And that's correct. And then it turns into just a clean up into a landscaping job, because then you've got to replace the plants or do something with those garden beds to actually make it presentable.
And different people would have different expectations on what they want the end product to look like as well. Is that something you can guide people around?
Well, it's something you can guide people around too, but a lot of people have also a financial constraint. They don't want to spend too much money, but they obviously want it presentable at the time of selling or leasing.
Yes. And Rod, I can see you nodding in the background here. Tell us if you've got a story in mind that you want to share around, when you first arrive at someone's house and they're like, make over our carpet or windows.
yes. I've went into quite a lot of different places and had some different experiences, but the big thing for me is doing a walkthrough with the people initially and pointing out some of the stains like pet urine, coffee and tea and wine, and explaining to them that they may not necessarily come out. So being very honest from the start, doing that walkthrough creates such a better transaction.
So that's actually really similar to what Mark said, in that setting the expectations and making sure that everyone's all on the same page to, what the end point is that everyone's wanting to work towards.
Yeah, and I think there's a bit of a school of thought with a lot of in the property industry around renovating and landscaping, everything. But what you said before about Mark, about the cost constraint, it has to be done as efficiently as possible too, because a lot of people don't have a spare $40,000 to give their house a total makeover, new carpets. I mean, that's the ideal scenario: new carpet, new painting, new landscaping in the garden, new lawn, new everything. But the costs can run into, tens, $20,000, $50,000. I think that it's something that should be kept in mind. We're talking about, yes, presentation's important, but also efficiently presenting your home and garden is really important. So do you have some perhaps cost-saving ideas maybe that might be worth considering for people?
Well, might be worth considering for people. Sometimes it could be a case of it's purely just a time job. That's where all the cost is. So
Yes.
as much as they can do before you get there can save them some money. But also it's about setting those expectations, as we spoke about before. With doing that, you then show value for your service. So you got to give them the expectation of like, well, if I spend $10,000, am I going to get that back on the sale? And if the answer is no, there's no point doing $10,000 worth of work.
So some people will do, as you just mentioned, some work on their own. What are a couple of things that you might recommend to people that they could have a head start on before someone like you actually comes in and does some of the heavy work?
In relation to garden beds, so if they do a majority of the weeding through there, that's going to save a lot of time. The lawn mowing and stuff like that, it's always probably quicker and more efficient for me to come in and do it. Having the right equipment to do the right job is a big part of that.
What about bark? I often see people laying new bark when they're preparing their property for sale. Is that a recommendation? Is it easy? Is it hard? Is it cost effective? Is it some professional, or can people just do it themselves?
New mulch in the garden beds is always going to make it look nicer. Weed and then mulch laid down is going to make the colour come out. Doing it yourself, yes, that's perfectly fine, but I honestly wouldn't buy the bags from Bunnings. You're
Right.
better off going to sand and soil, and you can get 2-3 meters delivered for $200, where you're paying like $500 if you want to do it in bags.
Yeah, and then it becomes a family activity. So talking about doing it yourself, Rod, in relation to the carpets, I've seen in the supermarket the hire your own, and you're laughing again, hire your own like steam cleaner. Can you tell me the difference between doing that and bringing in a professional to do it, to do the carpets for you?
Well, first thing is probably about a $40,000 difference with the machinery. But in terms of heat, when you're using a machine like mine, it feeds in through a garden tap, but the machine heats it to about 195 degrees Fahrenheit.
Okay.
So that's going to kill a lot of germs in the carpet.
Yes.
And with the machine also, it has a really powerful suction, so it's going to pull out a lot of that debris and garbage from the
So
carpet.
your machine that you generally use is like it's a what's it called? What do we?
So it's called a truck mount machine.
Right.
And those machines are bolted into the back of the vans.
Yes.
They're very professional. In terms of suction and heat, yeah, it's just so strong. They're the best thing you can sort of get for cleaning those carpets.
And then what about the supermarket ones? Obviously, then
So I guess it comes down to, as Mark was talking before, about efficiency too. Like I can get in and out of a house, in probably an hour to an hour and a half, and we're done, move on with life. With those supermarket machines, you're constantly putting in water, emptying the water. You're not getting that suction. You're not getting the
does
heat.
that use hot water as well?
You have to, put hot water straight into it.
So you're boiling the kettle
Yeah, boiling
And
the
then
kettle or hot
putting
water
that-
from the tap. So it's not going to keep it hot.
Yeah.
It's going to lose its heat. So, if I guess it doesn't have time to cool down because you're going through that water so quickly. And that's another thing in terms of efficiency, that you're having to empty it all the time and refill it. So it's an hour and a half for me to do something as opposed to 6 or 7 hours to do your whole house. So my time's far more precious than that.
So
Personally.
If people are obviously, when people are renting, it's expected that the carpets get cleaned when people are vacating. When people are selling the property, there's not so much that expectation there around that the carpets are cleaned before they hand it over to the new buyers or the purchasers, owners of that property. What do you think about that? And
I think you don't have to do it as you said, but personally, I think it's something you should do, like getting rid of all that stuff. I think it's just a duty of care. I think it's being nice to the next person.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think that if you're going to do it, it's probably better to do it at the start of the campaign, not at the end. Well,
Exactly.
maybe at the end as well, but depending on how they are. Then with that, to what extent do people need to remove furniture and clean out it's all well and good to say you can clean a whole house in an hour, but normally there's a whole bunch of stuff in people's houses. So how do you get around that?
So when we initially talk or make that inquiry, that person makes that inquiry, I'll step them through that. So I will explain to them that, we expect small furniture to be moved. If they don't want to move their beds or their couches because they're so heavy, leave them in place, especially if it's the start of the campaign. You don't have to sort of do that, but at the end when you sell and all your furniture's out, I'd advise then get me back in and give it a thorough clean underneath.
Yeah, okay. So you can't do half a room, then move the couch and then do the other half, or does it require drying once you've gone through it?
You can move it.
Yep.
The expectation is that someone would be there to help me move it.
Of course.
Just, a labour
You're
on
a
our back.
strapping young lad. I'm sure you could manage that on your own.
Yeah, maybe one day a week, but yeah, the rest of the other 4 I'd be in crippled state.
so I imagine you also do window cleaning. Is that one of at what time does that happen? So some people talk to real estate agents and then there's a bit of time between when they actually put the house on the market. Do you do your windows before you bring the real estate agents through? Do you do it just before you put the house on the market?
I would do it just before the house goes on the market, because you're going to have gardeners through, you're going to have, people with the mulch kicking up dust. So I'd be the last person generally to come in before you start doing those photos.
Yep. Okay. So interesting point on the photos. Mark, I haven't forgotten you. I'm coming back to you. I've got a good question for you in a second. I came from a photography background, so I know a little bit about it. But am I correct in saying that sometimes a little bit of dust and if the windows aren't perfect, it actually doesn't show up in the photos? Would that be right?
That's correct.
Yeah. So somewhere around when you're launching and you're bringing people through is the best time. So
Definitely.
before you have people through in real life.
Definitely.
Great. So Mark, you also do a little bit of other bits and pieces around the property, like property services. So are there little things like fixing the locks on the door or little things around the house that you've seen as you've been helping a property prepare to go for market that you can recommend that people do?
Well, those little touch-up jobs really. So a lot of people hang frames on the wall of photos, or they try and use those command strips, and paint comes off the wall, and
Yes.
which you've probably seen a lot of.
Yeah, definitely. Because a lot of people like to bring down their family photos as well before they start bringing people through. So you're able to jump in and just clean that up and
Yeah, you clean
patch
that up.
them up for them.
Generally, most houses, all the newer ones, they have a tin of leftover paint. So
Yes, yep.
I wouldn't recommend using that paint if it's a couple of years old, but you can then match it at the paint shop, and then you can come back and do those little touch-ups to make that wall look like it's supposed to, rather than those real little rips in the paintwork.
Yeah. Have you found that if, I don't know, because sometimes, like I imagine you're in before the property goes into market, but you might have had the experience talking to someone once they've already been on the market. But I'm thinking like if the front gate latch isn't working properly or there's a crack in the glass in the front door, those little tiny things are great to get fixed up, because if they're not, it sort of can sometimes allow the buyer to think, well, if these things are not fixed up, what is there underneath the surface? Is that something that you've come across?
No, you're exactly right there, and it all comes down to first impressions. But it's everything in life. That first impression, that first meeting with something, and that's going to impact your second meeting. So if you go in and the latch is broken or hanging off, or you see a crack in the window, your expectation of that house walking in is now lowered by that minimum of 10%, because you're going, oh, well, this is not up to new quality, so what's the rest of the house got?
Yeah, so part of your service, I imagine, would be, you said you would meet with the gardens and you do a bit of a walkthrough. So for you, not being the person that lives in the property, sometimes you have different eyes for the property, you know, like when you're living there all the time, you don't see things.
Yes.
But if you're doing a walkthrough initially, you might pick up little things that aren't super cost heavy, that the owners of the property might not pick up.
That's exactly right. I always go into a property going, what would I like to see if I was buying this? Or what would I like to see if I was going to be renting this tomorrow? And they're the things that I look out for.
Yeah, I think it's something that really stands out to me is the front door. You know, people will often leave dust and cobwebs, and particularly if the front door is not the main door that gets used, but that's the first where someone who's coming to buy or rent property, that's their first port of call. So and it's frustrating because after a windy, dusty day, it gets dusty again. But I always say to people, if you can get just a sponge and you know, keep that front entrance clean, free of cobwebs and dust, then it is something that draws the eye when it's dirty of a potential buyer.
So, Rod, with the windows, what are some tips that people can do themselves, either if they haven't got the budget to bring in a professional to clean the windows, or they've had a professional in and they want to maintain that cleanliness throughout their campaign? Can you give us a couple of tips of what they might do themselves and maybe what products to use?
Yep, so don't buy Windex. It's going to leave streaks on your windows. The best thing you can go out and do is just go out and buy yourself a good squeegee and a good sleeve with a handle from.
What's a sleeve?
So a sleeve goes over the handle for washing your windows. You can get them from the window cleaning shop. So it's like the fluffy thing that you put in the soap in the bucket.
Okay, yep, like a mop but on a stick.
Yeah,
Is that right?
Exactly.
Yep.
Mops on a stick.
Yeah. So and then you can wash your windows that way. There's plenty of YouTube videos out there too to learn how to clean the windows, like the trick of up and down the mountain. So that's one of the ways to clean your window.
What about vinegar? Is that like an old wives' tale or?
Yeah, no vinegar.
No vinegar.
Yeah, put the vinegar away.
So hot water
Save
or
that for
cold
the
water?
chips.
Hot or cold water?
Just warm water generally.
Warm. Okay.
Will help clean that up. And buy yourself a heap of microfiber cloths just to wipe around your sills and your frames.
Yeah, I think that's important, isn't it? Like the fly wire screens as well, because you can have the perfect windows, and if your fly wire screens are all dusty and dirty, that sort of ruins the whole show, doesn't it?
And that can be quickly wiped down with a microfiber cloth and hot water. It's soapy water too. And good old Morning Fresh is the best thing to use.
Morning Fresh, yeah, I use that with my on my floor. So there you go.
And just on carpets too. So if hypothetically someone does get their carpets cleaned up before they go to market and then they want to really maintain it, I think probably your advice as a carpet cleaner would be to say get the pets inside and eat around the couch on the carpet and spill as much as you can on there so you get another job. Yep. But what's the best way of people maintaining the carpets once they've been cleaned?
So frequent vacuuming is always encouraged. But I think it all comes down to, again, investing in something good. So having a really good quality vacuum that has really good suction, that will vibrate all the junk out of the carpet. So
Have you got a recommendation?
I do actually.
Yeah.
It's a Windsor.
Here's one we prepared earlier.
A Windsor upright vacuum. So available at a good wholesaler that sells that sort of stuff. So you don't get that sort of stuff from Godfrey's so much.
Okay,
It's
so
more-
how could just general punters get that?
So the best place to go is carpetcleanerswarehouse.com.au.
Okay.
And find it there.
Do you need
or
an
just
ABN or
contact me.
anything, or-
Send me a text and I'll help
And
you
you
out.
can. Okay, great. So,
So
Rod
that
from
people
Well
often
Clean
have,
Carpets.
you see those stick vacuum cleaners that there are very common. Is if someone was in the market for a new vacuum, not that this is an infomercial, but it would, sounds as though there's better options.
Definitely. The stick vacuums do have a place in the market and around the home. They're good for your little quick tidy ups, tiles, especially in the kitchen, with the breadcrumbs and all that stuff, and the kids have spilt food on the floor, where you don't have to do that full detail vacuum. That's where they're sort of really handy.
So that's similar to what you were saying, Mark, around having the right product for the job can really increase the efficiency and the final outcome.
Exactly. It's all about using the right tool, because you can spend half an hour with the wrong tool and you still got to go back to the toolbox.
Yeah. So we're just about to wrap up, and there's lots of information there that we've gathered. So thank you so much.
I think we need to buy some more stuff.
Yeah. Okay, Jackson. Like we don't have a garage full of things anyway. We back on to topic. So if you were to give our listeners our listeners are remembering people who are looking to sell their property, 2 tips, what do you think they would be?
Well, the first tip would be get the people in early. Like if you're thinking about selling, that's a good time to have a conversation, because it's not going to cost you anything for me to come in and give you some advice or where you might be able to increase some value.
Yeah. Okay. So that's a low risk,
And
no cost.
If you don't end up going forward, at least you've got a clean garden.
Well, that's exactly right. That always helps. But at the same token, then they know they're fully informed moving in what they're up for. And tip number 2 is more of a frame of mind to look at it. It's like you wouldn't buy a second-hand car and you open the door and it's full of dust. You tell them to go back in and clean it. So basically, if you're looking to sell a house or buy a house, insist on it being clean first, because that presentation, that first impression, is what everyone's going to go off.
Yeah, that's a great tip. Yeah, it is certainly, and I think it's less than a second. I can't exactly remember what the exact number is, but it's less than a second that people's brain takes to create that first impression. So yeah, I like it. What about you, Rod?
Tip number 1, again, a bit like Mark, is get us in early.
When you say early, like for both of you, what's early? Like, is it a week before, 3 months before,
I'd
6 months before?
maybe a couple of months before, so giving us time to come through.
Yeah. Do you find people don't do that, or?
A lot of people don't do that. No,
Okay.
it's generally
So
a couple of
that's
weeks out.
It's
and
a
they're like,
common mistake that people make.
It's generally, I'll get a lot of calls sort of generally 2 to a week close to, that we're going to market. Oh my God, my carpets are trashed. What can you do about it? And they're actually adding more anxiety to themselves by not having that preparation in place.
Yeah. So tip number 1, get in early. Tip number 2?
Get in early. I think initially you always got to have the right equipment.
Okay.
And like having a good quality vacuum would definitely help in the long run, in terms of, it's going to be less work for me to come in and do it, on like Mark too, having that equipment early, it's going to save you money in the long run, because
It's a bit
you're
like
doing
having
things properly.
solar panels. It might cost a bit to put them on, but in the long term, it's very
Return on
cost
investment's
saving.
there.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the same with the garden too. If you can spend a few hours on your own you've removed the obvious stuff, then that makes a big difference when you come in and have to, that heavy lifting's already been done.
Well, it makes a huge difference. It makes that cleanup so much smoother. So the heavy lifting's done. So you're just going through and touching up and then doing the main part. you're not having to go through from start to finish, and they can already see the difference in themselves.
So tip of the day is get in early.
Get in early, and I think we're getting in early. Like, I know I do carpet cleaning, but also do tile and grout cleaning. So having that, me come through and going, hey, you know, looking at your tiles here in the kitchen, the grout's black. You know, I can help you with that and try and get it back to a lighter colour.
So there might be some things that, exactly what Mark said earlier, like there might be some things that you as professionals can see and identify that because you're living in the house the whole time, you don't sort of pick up. So much great information. Thank you so much. How are you feeling now, you two? You got this sorted? You're going to be back again?
Yeah, definitely.
Definitely be back again.
Thank you so much. So if people are wanting to chat with both of you, where can they find you, Mark?
Well, they can find me on Facebook, but they can also find me on the website at lawnworkspropertyservices.com.au.
Awesome. Thank you, Mr. Mark Wood. And Rod Dreesen, what about you? Where can people find you?
Yeah, at www.wowcleancarpets.com.au. I'm also on Facebook and Instagram. Reach out.
Great. Awesome. Thank you so much, gentlemen. Great
Thanks, guys.
episode.
Thanks
you.
for having us.